The day I received the final divorce decree, I knew the old door to a mistaken marriage had slammed shut behind me. 3 years as Ethan Miller's wife. 3 years in which I had given my heart, my money, and my trust to the Miller family. Now, looking back, I saw myself as an innocent lamb surrounded by a pack of hungry wolves. My name is Chloe. I was orphaned as a child but was fortunate enough to be raised with the love of my maternal grandparents. Thanks to a small talent for the floral business, a family tradition, I had managed to build a charming little flower shop and accumulate considerable savings. Naively, I thought the money I earned should be shared with my husband's family to build a future together. Who would have thought that generosity would make me such an easy target? With the divorce papers in my hand, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a 2,000-pound weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Ethan, my ex-husband, stood before me, his face pale. He had tried to hold on to me with lies until the very last minute, but I was done with his hypocrisy. He didn't love me. He loved my bank account and my generosity, which bordered on foolishness. Chloe, do you really have to be so cruel? After all, we were husband and wife, Ethan said in a pitiful tone. I just managed a bitter smile, a smile I had kept hidden for 3 long years. Ethan, this cruelty is something your own family taught me. You, your mother, and your sister have used my money as you pleased for 3 years, and now you want to maintain a sham marriage just to keep squeezing me dry. Besides, you already have someone else. What's the point of putting on this show for your ex-wife? Ethan was about to argue, but my phone vibrated. It was a message from Tiffany, my ex-sister-in-law. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. It wasn't an apology or a question about my well-being, but a picture of her grinning from ear to ear next to another woman. Below it was a provocative caption. Congrats to Ethan for finally ditching the starter wife. I'm treating everyone to an all-expenses-paid weekend at the luxury spa in Napa Valley to welcome my new sister-in-law, Ashley. Thanks, Chloe, for funding the courtship that allowed my brother to find true love. Enjoy your solitude. Signed, Tiffany, your ex-husband's sister. I stared at the photo. The girl named Ashley was the mistress who had infiltrated my marriage. The picture was taken at an incredibly expensive resort I had once suggested treating the whole family to, but my mother-in-law had always refused, claiming the trip was too costly. And now Tiffany was bragging about booking it all, clearly to provoke me to the very end. The rage inside me erupted like a wildfire in a dry field. That photo and message weren't just a provocation. They were a public declaration of the Miller family's bottomless contempt and greed. They saw my divorce as a victory, a chance to continue enjoying themselves at my expense. I looked up at Ethan, my gaze as cold as ice. Ethan, do you know what your sister is doing? I asked in a monotone voice. Ethan looked puzzled but took out his phone. He didn't just not deny it, he casually liked Tiffany's photo and commented, "Thanks, sis. I'll be inviting the whole family to the wedding." That gesture was a slap across my face, an irrefutable confirmation. They had been preparing for this day for a long time, and now they were reveling in their spoils. My feelings were no longer of pain, but had transformed into a steely determination. For 3 years, I had been too soft. Now it was time to take everything back, not out of spite, but for justice and self-respect. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. Ethan watched me suspiciously. He expected me to cry, to beg, or to make a scene, but I only smiled, a smile filled with mystery. Ethan, you and your family have always thought I was stupid and easy to manipulate, but today I'm going to show you that this Chloe not only knows how to make money but also how to demand justice. I swiped my finger across my phone screen and opened my banking app. My money, the money I let you all spend freely for 3 years, consider it the interest on the hard lesson I've learned from your family. Now, class is over. Ethan stared at me, still not understanding what I was doing, but his face was beginning to show signs of anxiety. "What are you doing, Chloe? Don't do anything foolish," he yelled. I ignored his words. I had to act quickly and decisively. At that moment, my rage had become my greatest motivation. I wanted the Miller family, who were at that very instant celebrating in Napa, to taste the bitter flavor of misfortune, to understand what it felt like to lose everything when you are at the peak of your enjoyment. I went into my card management settings and selected all the supplementary cards I had issued to my husband's family. In total, there were 11 cards, including those for his grandparents, aunts, uncles, his mother Barbara, Tiffany, and of course, Ethan. I had given one to each of them, thinking it was a way to show my affection and integrate myself. Now, I had to put an end to that useless generosity. One by one, I selected all 11 cards, locked them, and permanently canceled them. I did it all calmly, without the slightest hesitation. Each tap on the screen was a decisive blow to the life of luxury the Miller family had been enjoying on my dime. I saved all the statements and transfer receipts as evidence. I wouldn't let them deny a thing. Ethan, seeing my determination, began to feel real panic. He understood that a large part of his comfortable life, and that of his family, depended on my endless source of money. "What are you doing? Do you realize what you're doing? How dare you cancel my card and my mother's and Tiffany's?" Ethan lunged toward me, his pleading tone transformed into anger and panic. I kept my eyes on the screen, waiting for the final notification from the bank. When the message confirming the successful cancellation appeared, I lifted my head and faced him. "I have canceled all 11 supplementary cards I issued for your family. Don't worry. My primary card is still active, but none of you have the right to use another cent of my money. This money is mine, and I decide what happens to it." Ethan lunged, trying to snatch the phone from me. "Give it to me. I'll call the bank to reactivate them right now." I took a step back, dodging his attempt. I knew perfectly well that once it was done, it couldn't be immediately reversed. The cancellation was permanent. "Don't bother. It's already done. You and your family have spent my money for 3 years. Now you'll have to fend for yourselves." Ethan stood frozen, his face contorted with anger and fear. The collapse of that inexhaustible financial source was a devastating blow to him. I glanced at the clock. At this hour, Tiffany and my mother-in-law Barbara were probably enjoying the hot springs, getting ready for a lavish dinner. I knew my phone would be ringing soon, and that would be the true beginning of my revenge. With the phone that had served its mission in my hand, I turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there like a statue. In that instant, I felt like I had been reborn. I was no longer the naive, easily deceived Chloe. I was the Chloe of determination, of justice, and of vengeance. I told myself that this was only the beginning. I left the lawyer's office where I had just signed the divorce papers and went straight to my favorite coffee shop. I wanted to treat myself to a caramel macchiato, something I had forbidden myself during my marriage because my mother-in-law said it was a tacky and unhealthy drink. All the old habits, all the absurd rules of the Miller family, I was going to erase them from my life. After I left, Ethan called me non-stop, but I ignored every call. His ringtone chimed incessantly, but I just sipped my hot coffee, savoring its sweetness. I knew Ethan would have never imagined I would dare to act so decisively. In his eyes, and in the eyes of his family, I was a weak woman who only knew how to serve and endure. They forgot that a businesswoman like me, once she makes a decision, sees it through to the end. Sitting in the coffee shop, I opened the banking app again to review the list of canceled cards. 11 names, 11 faces appeared in my mind. Barbara, my mother-in-law, she used the card to withdraw cash for trips to the riverboat casino and to buy luxuries without a second thought. Tiffany, my sister-in-law, used it to buy designer bags and shoes, travel everywhere, and constantly show off. Ethan, my ex-husband, used it to buy expensive gifts for his mistress Ashley, to treat his friends, and to pretend he was a successful man. The grandparents, aunts, and uncles, though they didn't spend as much as the other 3, also saw my card as an extra source of income for unnecessary whims. I was sick of being the Miller family's personal ATM. As expected, just 15 minutes later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Ethan. I declined the call. He called again. I declined again. On the 5th call, I turned off my phone. Half an hour later, I turned it back on to check the situation. I wanted him to taste the flavor of helplessness before I officially faced the chaos I had created. I opened a new bank account and transferred all my savings, leaving only a small amount in the old account so I could continue to monitor it. Even though the supplementary cards were canceled, I wanted to be aware of any movements or related messages in case they tried something stupid. About an hour later, when I had almost finished my coffee, my phone vibrated. This time it wasn't Ethan, but a landline from Napa, California. I frowned and answered, Chloe speaking. A professional but tense female voice came from the other end. Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Mrs. Chloe Miller? I am the receptionist at the Napa Valley Wellness Retreat. I replied calmly. Yes, this is she. What is it about, ma'am? We are calling to inform you about the payment for the reservation for Miss Tiffany Miller's party. The bill for their 3-day, 2-night stay, which includes spa services, treatments, meals, and the VIP suite, comes to a total of $10,000. However, Miss Tiffany's card has been declined 3 times. We tried to run other cards she provided, but they all indicate that the service has been canceled or they are denying payment. Miss Miller told us that the cards are yours and that you are the one sponsoring this trip. I smiled to myself. The plan had worked. Ah, I see, I responded casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Miss Miller is correct. I did provide those cards to her and her family in the past. But my ex-husband, Ethan Miller, and I have just divorced, and I have canceled all supplementary card services from my bank. In other words, those cards are no longer valid. The receptionist's voice sounded confused. So, you mean you are not going to pay for these services? Ma'am, Ethan Miller, Tiffany Miller, Barbara Miller, and I no longer have any legal or financial relationship. Besides, this trip is to entertain my ex-husband's mistress, which has nothing to do with me. Please inform Miss Miller and Mrs. Miller that they need to pay their own bill. If they can't, that's their problem. I have no responsibility. I heard a loud murmur on the other end of the line. It seemed my ex-mother-in-law and ex-sister-in-law were nearby. The receptionist stammered, "Understood." However, Miss Miller and Mrs. Miller are very upset. They say they will not pay and are demanding that you make the payment immediately, or they will make a scene. I let out a dry laugh. Let them make whatever scene they want. That's the Miller family's usual attitude. But you should also remember that their scene will affect the reputation and security of your resort. As the former cardholder, I suggest you cancel all their services and ask them to leave the premises. If they don't pay, proceed according to your establishment's rules. I am just confirming that I will not be paying for or vouching for that group of guests. I hung up, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Immediately after, my phone started ringing like crazy. This time, it was my ex-mother-in-law, Barbara's number. I smirked and waited for the second call to answer slowly. I wanted her to savor the anxiety and confusion. The moment I picked up, a shrill voice, full of anger and resentment, pierced my ear. "Chloe, what the hell are you doing? Tell the bank to reactivate my card right now. My card, Tiffany's, the whole family's cards are blocked." "What game are you playing?" I kept my voice calm, as if I were talking about the weather. "Look, Mrs. Miller, I've divorced Ethan. You and I are nothing to each other anymore. The bank cards are my property, and I have the right to decide when to stop their use. I think you and Tiffany should pay your own bill, don't you? Why are you calling me? Us pay? Do you know how much it is? Almost $10,000. How are Tiffany and I supposed to have that much cash on us right now? Reactivate the cards. Do you know where we are? It's Napa. It's a chilly 50 degrees out here." I feigned surprise on purpose. "Oh my. Only 50 degrees? Well, you'll have to bundle up then, Mrs. Miller. I hear that spa is very expensive. I'm sure they have plenty of warm blankets and comforters, right?" Barbara's voice grew even sharper. "What blankets and comforters? Those rude receptionists have kicked us out of our room. They threw all our luggage outside in the cold. I'm standing here shivering at the door. You're evil. Do you want us to freeze to death?" I could hear Barbara's shrieking voice through the phone, with Tiffany's sobs in the background. I pictured the scene. The two of them, in all their designer clothes, stranded in the cold, having to hug their suitcases, dying of embarrassment. A sense of glee washed over me. Mrs. Miller, I don't want you to freeze to death. I just want you and Tiffany to get a little taste of what it's like to lose everything. You say I'm evil. You should ask yourselves who the real evil ones have been, who has been sucking me dry for the last 3 years. I decided not to beat around the bush. I had to let her know that I knew everything. Let me remind you, Mrs. Miller, that the amount of money you all have spent on my supplementary cards in these 3 years amounts to almost $50,000. You say you want me to freeze to death? Remember that bag worth over $6,000 Tiffany just bought herself? Remember the hundreds of dollars in cash you withdrew to go to the casino? And Ethan, your son, my ex-husband, spent over $10,000 on expensive gifts for his mistress, Ashley. Mrs. Miller, think about it. Who has wanted to freeze my life with their greed and lies? Barbara fell silent. She didn't expect me to know every detail. Tiffany also stopped crying. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on until Barbara stammered, "What are you saying? Have you been spying on us?" "I don't need to spy. The bank statements are the clearest proof." "Mrs. Miller, did you really think this Chloe was so stupid that she wouldn't notice anything?" I kept silent because I still respected the marriage, but that's no longer necessary. You and Tiffany should call Ethan to sort out the payment. I'm sure he'll feel quite helpless, because he doesn't have a supplementary card to use either. Besides, he doesn't have much money left to buy gifts for his new mistress. He'll still have to worry about finding money to buy a train ticket back to Chicago. I smiled faintly and added one last sentence. I hope you and Tiffany have an unforgettable stay in Napa with its 50-degree weather. I hung up and turned off my phone again. That call had given me absolute satisfaction. I had officially declared war and won the first battle. I would wait for them to return to Chicago to confront them and claim everything that was mine. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, but this time I just watched the screen without answering. Since canceling the cards and speaking with Barbara, I knew the chaos in the Miller family was just beginning. I wanted them to experience absolute helplessness and confusion before I faced them directly. I turned on my phone, but only to read the messages. An avalanche of insults, pleas, and threats from Ethan, Tiffany, and Barbara flooded my screen. Tiffany wrote, "Chloe, you are a horrible person. Do you know how many people are staring at us? You left us on the street in the cold. Aren't you afraid of karma?" Ethan messaged, "Chloe, reactivate my mother's and Tiffany's cards right now. We'll talk later. Don't make things worse. Money can be earned back, but affection can't." I skimmed through them, shaking my head. Affection? When had that family ever shown me affection? They only knew greed and exploitation. I decided to reply to just one message. Ethan's. "Ethan, our affection ended the moment you started cheating on me with Ashley. I'm just reclaiming my money. You're right, money can be earned back. You should tell your mother and sister to get a job to pay the bill in Napa. See you in Chicago." I didn't respond to any more messages. I just observed. What I wanted was to see their humiliation, not to hear meaningless apologies or threats. Half an hour later, Ethan called me through a messaging app. I decided to answer to find out the situation. Ethan's voice on the other end was hoarse, filled with anxiety and panic. He no longer had his usual air of false calm. "Chloe, listen to me. My mother and Tiffany are being held in the resort's security office. They won't let them leave unless they pay. Think about the Miller family's reputation." I took a sip of water and replied calmly, "Mr. Miller, the Miller family's reputation was thrown away by your mother and sister a long time ago. The proof is that photo Tiffany posted on social media showing off their luxury trip. They were using my money to have fun, and you confirmed it by liking the photo. Now they have to face the consequences of their actions. Whether they're held or kicked out is their problem, not mine. But, my mother is very cold. She says it's 50 degrees outside, and all her luggage is thrown out. Her warm clothes are in the suitcases." Ethan's voice was almost a plea. "Well then, you should buy a plane ticket and get yourself to Napa right now. You are her son and her brother. You have a responsibility to them. If you have money to buy $10,000 gifts for your mistress, surely you have enough to buy a ticket and pay your mother and sister's bill. Or have you forgotten that you have your own bank account?" "My account? I don't have that much money. Do you know how much this trip costs? $10,000. I don't have that much cash. I feigned surprise. Wow, only $10,000? That amount is nothing compared to the $50,000 your family spent on my supplementary cards in 3 years. Ethan, you should get used to paying your own expenses and taking responsibility. That's real life. Ethan was silent for a moment. I knew he was cornered. He had gotten too used to living off me. Chloe, don't push me. What you've done is illegal. Canceling the cards without warning and causing harm to others isn't allowed. He began to threaten me. I let out a dry laugh. Ethan, I'm already divorced from you. I am the account holder. I have every right to cancel the cards. Besides, what I've done is not illegal at all. They used my cards to pay for an unjustified luxury trip, and the payment was declined. The fault is theirs. You can sue me, but I will present all the detailed statements to prove they squandered my assets during the marriage. Who do you think will look ridiculous in front of the judge and the public? Ethan was completely disarmed. He knew I was telling the truth. All the evidence was against him. He had grown accustomed to living under my protection and was now incapable of solving the problems his own family had caused. After hanging up, I received another message, this time from the resort's receptionist. Miss Chloe, Mrs. Barbara, and Miss Tiffany caused a major disturbance, bothering the other guests. The management has ordered security personnel to escort them off the premises. They have collected their luggage and are being transported in a vehicle back to the city. However, they have not yet paid the bill. We will be sending a notice to the relevant authorities to resolve this debt. Thank you for clarifying the information about the cards. I breathed a sigh of relief. The Napa drama was over. I had achieved my first objective, the humiliation and helplessness of the Miller family. They had endured the cold, been expelled, and most importantly, been made a fool of in front of other wealthy guests. I finished my coffee, preparing for the direct confrontation in Chicago. I knew Barbara and Tiffany would return that same night or the next morning. They wouldn't let things go. They would come to my house to scream, cry, and beg. And I, Chloe, would be waiting for them with a pile of bills and a will of steel. If they wanted a war, they would get one. But this time, I would set the rules of the game. I told myself that Napa was just the appetizer. Chicago would be the real battlefield. That night I couldn't sleep, not from worry, but from the thrill of seeing my plan unfold perfectly. I had put my phone on silent but kept watching the screen. As expected, the insulting and threatening messages from Barbara and Tiffany kept coming, but I only skimmed them. I wanted them to experience the most absolute exhaustion, panic, and shame. The next morning, as I was watering the pots of yellow chrysanthemums in my flower shop, my phone rang again. This time it was a video call from Barbara's number. I smiled and decided to answer. I wanted to see with my own eyes their pitiful state after a hellish night. The image that appeared on the screen almost made me burst out laughing. Barbara, the woman who was always impeccably dressed in silks, now had disheveled hair, a haggard face, and was sitting in a dark corner. Next to her, Tiffany, in a similar state, was clutching one of the designer bags she had bought with my card. Chloe, you finally answer. Tell me where you are right now. Barbara's voice was hoarse, filled with exhaustion and anger. I held up the phone and did a slow spin to show her the bright and vibrant atmosphere of my flower shop, Chloe's Blooms. Look, Mrs. Miller, I'm at my flower shop, Chloe's Blooms. Remember? Enjoying a fresh and fragrant morning in Chicago. Have you and Tiffany made it back yet? I emphasized each word deliberately with a tone so sweet it was irritating. Barbara screamed through the phone, a sound that drew the attention of some passers-by. Stop pretending. You know perfectly well where I am. I'm at the airport. Tiffany and I had to buy one-way plane tickets last night to get back to Chicago. Do you know I had to borrow money from everyone to buy them? All my cards are blocked. You're evil. You wanted us to freeze to death. You wanted to see us stranded on the street? I placed the phone on the table on speaker mode while I continued to prune the withered leaves of the chrysanthemums. Mrs. Miller, I already told you I'm not that evil. I'm just reclaiming what is fair. I think the fact that you and Tiffany had to buy plane tickets and pay for your stay is something any responsible adult would do, isn't it? Why are you blaming me? I earned the money, and I decide where it goes. Decide what? That money is a marital asset. You can't do that, Barbara yelled. I stopped pruning and looked at the phone screen. Marital assets. Mrs. Miller, you're right. It is the fruit of my labor, and I shared it with Ethan's family. But let me ask you, how did you use these so-called marital assets? I began to reveal every detail, my voice cold and decisive as a sentence. I have reviewed all your expenses. The card I gave you was not for you to gamble away thousands of dollars at the Riverboat Casino. The card was not for Tiffany to buy a $6,000 handbag to show off a wealth she doesn't have. And most importantly, my card was not for Ethan, your son, to spend over $10,000 on jewelry, clothes, and the rent for a luxury apartment for his mistress, Ashley. My voice grew harder and harder, leaving Barbara speechless. Her face turned pale. Tiffany, beside her, bowed her head. Mrs. Miller, you say I'm evil because canceling the cards meant you had to endure 50-degree weather. But do you know that the money your family has drained from me in these 3 years amounts to almost $50,000? With that money, I could buy a small condo on the outskirts of Chicago or open 2 more branches of my flower shop. You all have frozen my future and my trust with your bottomless greed. Barbara tried to argue, but her words no longer carried the same force. You're lying. I don't gamble that much. And Tiffany only bought 1 bag. You're slandering me. Slandering? Mrs. Miller, the bank statements are irrefutable proof. I have saved everything, from the receipts from the casino ATMs to the invoice for Tiffany's bag and the one for the diamond ring purchased for Ashley. I have it all prepared. I'm not calling to argue, but to let you know that I know everything. I looked directly at the camera with a sharp gaze. Listen to me, you and Tiffany go home. I will wait for you and Ethan to come to my home here in Chicago. I will show you with your own eyes this thick binder of invoices. I have only one demand. Give me back all my money. Tiffany chimed in with a hurt voice. Chloe, how can you treat me like this? I'm your sister-in-law. Sister-in-law? Tiffany, have you ever considered me your sister-in-law? Would a real sister-in-law brag on social media about her sister-in-law's infidelity and divorce? Have you ever respected me instead of seeing my card as your personal ATM? Let's not talk about kinship anymore. Between your family and me, there is nothing left. I didn't give them a chance to say anything else. Mrs. Miller, I will wait for you and Ethan at home. You'd better come prepared with the money to talk to me. I am giving you one chance to resolve this amicably. I hung up the call abruptly. I didn't want to hear any more excuses or threats. The purpose of the call had been achieved, to show them I was no fool and was prepared for a legal battle. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than ever. I knew the biggest battle would take place in Chicago when they arrived, laden with anger and shame, to confront me. I had all the evidence ready to defeat their greed. I looked out the shop window at the bright Chicago sun. My new life, full of freedom and autonomy, had truly begun. I lived in a rented apartment in Lincoln Park, Chicago. I rented it after getting married as a private retreat, but it soon became my hideout from the meddling and impositions of my husband's family. Now, this apartment was my main battlefield. Exactly at 3 p.m. that day, as I was organizing the divorce documents and bank statements, the doorbell rang repeatedly, accompanied by loud bangs on the door. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Only the Miller family could show up at someone's home in such an aggressive and rude manner. Calmly, I changed into decent loungewear and went to open the door. In front of me was the usual trio: Ethan, Barbara, and Tiffany. Ethan's face was haggard, probably from having to manage the whole Napa disaster. Barbara and Tiffany still reflected the anger and resentment from their failed trip. Although they had changed clothes, the exhaustion was evident on their faces. Chloe, so you dare to open the door? The moment she saw me, Barbara lunged, trying to grab my arm, but I stepped back to dodge her. Mrs. Miller, Ethan, this is my home. Of course, I'll open the door. But I'm sorry, Ethan and I are divorced now, so I'm not inviting you in. If you have something to say, please, let's talk here. I maintained a safe distance, blocking the entrance. Barbara didn't give up and began her performance. Oh my God, I've taken care of this daughter-in-law for 3 years, and now she turns her back on me, steals all our money, blocks our cards, and gets my whole family humiliated in Napa. Now she wants to throw us out on the street. She started wailing, collapsing onto the floor in the building's hallway. The hallway, a common area for many young families who valued their peace, became the center of attention. Barbara's spectacle, sitting on the floor, crying at the top of her lungs, immediately drew the stares of my neighbors. Tiffany sat down next to her, joining in the pathetic crying. "Chloe is so mean. She's ruined my reputation. People are looking at me with contempt. You have to give me back my honor." Ethan, standing beside them, red with embarrassment, tried to lift his mother up without success. "Mom, stop. We're in an apartment building. Don't make a scene." I watched the scene with a frozen heart. I had witnessed these tears and theatrics too many times over the past 3 years. They always used tears and harassment to break me down, but not this time. I was prepared. I reached inside my apartment and pulled out a thick binder full of bank statements and detailed invoices. I held it with both hands and stepped out into the hallway. All the curious eyes of my neighbors focused on me and the Miller family sitting on the floor. I stood in front of Barbara and Tiffany, who were still crying. "Excuse me, everyone, for the noise," I said in a loud enough voice for the neighbors to hear. "I don't mean to disturb you, but my ex-husband's family is here claiming something that doesn't belong to them." I looked directly at Barbara. "Mrs. Miller, you and Tiffany say I've cut you off and that's why you're suffering, right? You think I'm a greedy and cruel person?" Without waiting for an answer, I dropped the binder on the floor with a decisive gesture. The thick binder, with hundreds of invoices and statements, scattered across the hallway. A sudden silence fell over the place, broken only by the whisper of paper. "There you have it, Mrs. Miller, Ethan, Tiffany, and everyone present." I pointed to the pile of papers. "Look, for 3 years of marriage, the Miller family has used 11 of my supplementary cards to finance their lavish lifestyle." Barbara and Tiffany stopped crying, lifting their heads to look at the papers scattered at their feet. The humiliation was plain on their faces. They didn't expect me to act in such a public and forceful way. I continued without hesitation. "In here is all the proof of how Miss Tiffany bought a $6,000 handbag to go out with her friends. Here are all the receipts for Mrs. Miller's cash withdrawals at the casinos she frequents. And here are all the invoices for the expensive gifts Mr. Ethan Miller bought for his mistress, Ashley." I bent down and picked up a statement with the month's largest expense marked in red. To be precise, just the spending on my supplementary cards in these 3 years amounts to $50,000. All that money is the fruit of my labor at the flower shop. I worked hard so they could have a comfortable life, and they betrayed and took advantage of me. I looked at the neighbors, whose faces now showed compassion. "So tell me, everyone, who is the parasite? Who is the cruel one? Was I right or wrong to cancel their cards and force them to pay for their own lives?" Ethan came forward, trying to gather the papers to hide the evidence, but it was too late. I had said it loud and clear, and there were many witnesses. "Chloe, stop it." "Are you humiliating my family?" Ethan said through clenched teeth. I let out a dry laugh. "Humiliating? The truth is the truth, Ethan. You and your family have humiliated yourselves with your greed. I've only brought the truth to light." Barbara stood up, pointing at me. "You dare to shame me here? I will never forgive you. Mrs. Miller, you may not forgive me, but I will sue you and Ethan for misappropriation and fraud if you don't return my money," I retorted firmly. I had turned their little show into my public revenge. I had used truth and evidence to crush their falsehoods in front of everyone. Now my neighbors knew everything. I was not the villain but the victim of their greed. I went back inside, grabbed an envelope I had already prepared, and threw it at Ethan. Inside is the summary of expenses and my debt claim. "Ethan, you and your family have to return a total of $70,000 to me. That figure includes the $50,000 in card expenses and the $20,000 from the wedding gift Mrs. Miller misappropriated. I'm giving you 3 days to resolve this. If not, I will file a lawsuit in court. Now, please, leave. This hallway is not a stage for your plays." I slammed the door shut, leaving the Miller family standing amidst the pile of papers, their faces pale with shame and fear. After slamming the door, I could still hear the commotion, the arguments, and the neighbors' murmurs outside. I knew this was the moment the Miller family faced the harsh reality. Their greed had been publicly exposed. I sat on the sofa, my hands still cold from touching the binder of statements. $50,000. A huge sum, the fruit of my labor that my ex-husband's family had squandered without mercy for 3 years. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was the wasted effort and trust. Half an hour later, everything calmed down. I knew they had left, taking their humiliation and shame with them. They didn't dare make any more of a scene because all the evidence was against them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I decided to review in detail every one of the large expenses they had made. I opened the file and examined Barbara's expenses. My ex-mother-in-law had always presented herself as a moral and frugal woman, constantly complaining about prices, but she was actually a compulsive gambler. The documents clearly showed that Barbara's card had been used to withdraw over $10,000 in cash from ATMs near casinos over the 3 years. That didn't even count the small transfers to friends who I knew were loan sharks or owners of those establishments. She used my money to fuel her gambling addiction. Then there was Tiffany, the sister-in-law who always boasted about being a lady from a good family. The documents detailed her luxury purchases: Louis Vuitton and Gucci bags, high-end shoes and cosmetics. In total, her expenses exceeded $15,000. The bag she had flaunted in Napa, valued at $6,000, she had bought just 2 weeks before I signed the divorce papers. She treated my money as if it grew on trees. And finally, Ethan, my ex-husband. The documents showed he had spent over $10,000 on a diamond ring, an expensive watch, and the rent for a small luxury apartment for Ashley, his mistress. He claimed they were business expenses, money from clients, but it all came from the supplementary card I had provided him. He used his wife's money to support his mistress. I looked at the grand total, $50,000. I took a deep breath. The facts were clear and irrefutable. They weren't just greedy, they were sophisticated scammers. The next morning, Ethan called me. His voice no longer held any arrogance, only weariness and fear. "Chloe, calm down. I know my family was wrong, but $50,000 is too much money. We can't get it right away. I think we should sit down and talk about how to resolve this." "How to resolve it, Ethan?" I retorted. "The only solution is for you to pay back the money. I gave you and your family 3 days. Today is the 2nd. Don't look for excuses to delay it. I have all the proof. If we go to court, it will be much worse for your family's reputation." Ethan fell silent. He was calculating. "I know I can pay back a part, but my mother doesn't have any money. Tiffany doesn't either. She's already spent it all. Couldn't you be a little understanding?" "Understanding?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Ethan, in these 3 years, how many times have you, your mother, and your sister been understanding with me? You've emptied my pockets without batting an eye. I am not a charity. You have to take responsibility for what your family has done. Tell your mother to sell some of her jewelry or the condo she lives in. Tell Tiffany to get a job and pay back the money, or you'll have to work to pay off the debt little by little." I was determined not to yield. They had to feel the price of their greed. "Ethan, that $50,000 is just the expenses. There's another amount your family has to pay." Ethan was confused. "What other amount?" "The $20,000 from the wedding gift Mrs. Miller misappropriated to buy Tiffany a condo. I want that back too. In total, $70,000. Ethan's silence stretched on until he exclaimed, "What? $20,000 from the wedding gift? What are you talking about? That money was for organizing the wedding. My mother used it to buy the jewelry, the preparations." I knew he was trying to deny it, but I was prepared for that lie. "Ethan, whether you remember it or not, I don't care. What matters is the proof. I'm going to show you the clearest proof of this deception." That afternoon, I decided to meet Ethan and Barbara at a public coffee shop. I wanted the conversation to take place in a busy place so they couldn't resort to aggression or victimhood. I arrived early with another, even thicker, binder of documents. It not only contained the proof of the $50,000 spent, but also the evidence of the $20,000 from the wedding gift. Ethan and Barbara arrived looking tense and tired. Ethan tried to maintain his composure while Barbara glared at me with resentment. Tiffany didn't dare to come, probably for fear of being humiliated again. "Chloe, explain this wedding gift thing to me." It's already excessive that you're demanding $50,000, but now you're adding another $20,000, Ethan said, trying to take the lead. Barbara intervened defiantly. Exactly. I received that money to take care of everything for the wedding. I used it to buy the gold, the jewelry, and even the car you bought to go to work. It's absurd for you to claim it. I smiled, a smile without warmth. Mrs. Miller, aren't you ashamed to lie like that? I think you should be honest in front of your son. I already know you and Ethan have been deceiving me with money, and I don't want to drag this out any longer. I opened the binder and took out 2 key documents: the bank transfer receipt for $20,000 and a property deed for a condo. I placed both papers on the table and slid them towards Ethan. Look, Ethan, this $20,000 was a wedding gift my family gave me. I then transferred it to your mother's account so she could handle everything. You say she used it for jewelry in the car, right? I pointed to the property deed. This is the deed for a condo in Wicker Park in Tiffany's name. The signing date is 1 week after I transferred the $20,000 to your mother, and the down payment curiously matches that same amount. There you have it, Mrs. Miller. Both Ethan and Barbara leaned in to look at the documents. Their faces changed instantly, from defiance to horror. Barbara stammered, "No, that's not right. I just borrowed it. I paid it back in cash later." I crossed my arms and shook my head. Borrowed? If it was a loan, why didn't you say anything to me or Ethan? Besides, I have reviewed all my account transactions. There is no return transfer from your mother's account to mine, Mrs. Miller. You not only deceived me, but you took advantage of my affection to buy your daughter a condo. Ethan looked at his mother with fury. Mom, what did you do? Did you really use the wedding gift money to buy Tiffany a condo? You didn't tell me anything. Barbara's lie had been exposed in front of her own son. She had misappropriated the wedding gift, the money my family had given me to start my new life, and used it to benefit her daughter. Ethan, don't tell your father. Mom just wanted Tiffany to have a stable place to live, Barbara pleaded. Mrs. Miller, what you want to do is your business, but I will not allow you to steal my assets in such a brazen way. I demand the $50,000 in expenses and the $20,000 from the wedding gift. In total, $70,000, not a penny less. Just then, I saw a group of people enter the coffee shop. It was my mother, my uncle, my aunt, and my cousin. I had asked them to meet me here. The appearance of my family caught Ethan and Barbara completely by surprise. My mother, Helen, a sharp and firm woman, had always been my biggest supporter. She walked over, placed a hand on my shoulder, and looked directly at Barbara and Ethan. Good afternoon, Barbara. Hello, Ethan. We've come as Chloe's family. We've heard the whole story. Barbara tried to stay calm. Well, Helen, what are you doing here? This is a family matter. We'll resolve it ourselves. My mother let out an ironic laugh. A family matter, Barbara? From the moment you misappropriated my daughter's wedding gift to buy a condo for yours, you broke any family tie. How long do you plan to keep deceiving my daughter? My mother pulled another bank statement from her purse, a copy of the $20,000 transfer from my account to Barbara's, certified by the bank. This is irrefutable proof that Chloe transferred $20,000 as a wedding gift. As Chloe's mother, I witnessed that transaction myself. You say you used that money for the wedding, but in reality, you used it to buy Tiffany a condo. My mother passed the statement to my uncle to see. My uncle Robert is a retired lawyer. My cousin Mark works for a large corporation. Their presence gave more weight to my words. My uncle nodded with a serious voice. Mrs. Miller, misappropriating Chloe's assets for your personal benefit is a serious crime. We not only have proof of the transfer but also of the property deed for your daughter's condo. This constitutes a crime of embezzlement, Barbara crumbled. She didn't expect my family to be so prepared and act so decisively. She turned to Ethan with a pleading look. Ethan, say something. Ethan, his face pale, stared at his mother. He couldn't believe his own mother was capable of lying so brazenly. She had not only deceived me but him as well. Mom, tell me the truth. Did you use the wedding gift money to buy Tiffany the condo? Ethan asked, a deep disappointment in his voice. Barbara lowered her head, not daring to look her son in the eye. She had been completely unmasked. My mother continued in an authoritative voice. Barbara, we didn't come here to argue but to protect our daughter. Chloe has been too lenient. You and Ethan have taken advantage of her kindness to squeeze her dry for 3 years. Now it's time to pay," my uncle added. "We have already consulted with a lawyer. If you and Ethan do not pay the full $70,000 debt in 3 days, Chloe will file a formal lawsuit in court. In that case, you will not only be forced to pay the debt with interest, but your family's reputation and honor will be severely damaged." My family had come to show the Millers that I, Chloe, was not alone and had solid legal backing. My family's unity and transparency were the most powerful weapon against their greed and lies. Ethan and Barbara dared not say another word. They had been defeated at the negotiating table after my family presented the irrefutable proof of the wedding gift misappropriation. The atmosphere in the coffee shop became suffocating. Ethan and Barbara had completely lost their initial arrogance. I looked directly at Ethan, the ex-husband who had betrayed me, and at Barbara, the mother-in-law who had deceived me. "Ethan, Mrs. Miller, everything is very clear. I don't want to hear any more excuses. I kept silent for too long and gave you a chance, but you didn't appreciate it." I pulled out a printed document, the official debt claim. This is the final summary. $50,000 in squandered expenses on the supplementary cards and $20,000 from the misappropriated wedding gift. Total, $70,000. I'm already divorced from you. Our financial relationship is over. You and your mother are responsible for returning the full amount to me. Ethan bit his lip, his face filled with desperation. "Chloe, $70,000 is too much. How are we going to pay it all in 3 days? That's your problem, not mine. You can sell Tiffany's condo, sell the car, or take out a loan. It's the price you have to pay for your greed. Remember what I told you? I gave you a 3-day ultimatum starting from 3 p.m. yesterday." My mother intervened with a firm voice. "Ethan, if you want to resolve this amicably and maintain a shred of dignity, you have to pay. If not, my daughter will file a lawsuit. Then, you will not only be forced to pay the debt but also the court costs and the interest accrued since the divorce. Furthermore, the whole truth about the deception, the misappropriation, the gambling, and your family's infidelity will be made public before the law and society." My uncle added a warning, "And any attempt to falsify documents or dispose of assets during this time will only worsen the situation. Mrs. Miller, if you and Ethan have that intention, we already have a contingency plan." I saw Ethan and Barbara's eyes meet, filled with panic. They knew they were on the verge of total collapse. "Ethan, ask Chloe to give us a little break. I don't have the money to pay," Barbara pleaded. "Not a penny less, Mrs. Miller. When you used my money to buy Tiffany a condo, did you think about reducing your greed a little?" "Now there is no more negotiation," I stated flatly. I handed the debt claim to Ethan. He took it reluctantly. "I'm saying this one last time. $70,000 by 11:59 p.m. Tomorrow, if I haven't received the payment notification, I will officially file the lawsuit at the Chicago courthouse, along with all the evidence I've gathered." I stood up, and my family did too. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to the flower shop. I don't want to waste any more time on people who can't be trusted." We left the coffee shop, leaving Ethan and Barbara mired in desperation and fear. I knew that from that moment until the next day, they would spend the most agonizing hours of their lives. After the ultimatum, I knew I had to be extra cautious. The Miller family, especially Tiffany, was reckless and blinded by money. I returned to the flower shop and focused on my work. Chloe's blooms was my asset, my hard work. I had to protect it at all costs. I knew that among the evidence I kept, some of the most important documents about Tiffany's large expenses were in my personal safe at the shop. I had considered all possibilities. Tiffany would surely try to destroy the evidence to evade her responsibility. That afternoon, I decided to implement my contingency plan. I hired a tech team to install high-tech hidden cameras focused on the safe area and the back door of the shop. I also changed the back door lock to an electronic one, with an alarm, but deliberately left a false appearance of a normal, easily forced mechanical lock. By 9 p.m., the system was installed. I checked the signal and motion notifications. Everything was working. I left the shop at 7, telling my employee I'd be away for a few days for personal matters. I wanted to create the perfect opportunity for Tiffany to act, just as I had predicted. At 11 p.m., I received an alert from the security cameras. Tiffany had snuck into my flower shop. She was dressed in dark clothes, a face mask, and carried a small crowbar. She went straight to the back, where my safe was. Sitting in front of my computer monitor, I watched her every move with a heart as cold as ice. Desperation and greed had turned her into a thief. Tiffany looked around, saw the seemingly normal lock, and breathed a sigh of relief. She used her tool to force it, but of course, the electronic lock I had installed wasn't that easy to break. After a while of struggling, she finally managed to open the door and slipped inside. She went straight to my office. The light from her flashlight illuminated the safe hidden in a corner. She started using the crowbar to pry it open. Tiffany thought all the evidence was there. She didn't know I had already removed all the original documents, and that what remained in the safe were just unimportant copies, along with a small tracking and recording device. I called Ethan. "Ethan, where are you? Do you know what your sister is doing?" I asked in a monotone voice. Ethan's voice sounded alarmed. "Chloe, what are you talking about?" "I don't know. You don't need to know. I'm watching the security cameras right now. Your dear sister Tiffany is forcing open my safe at the flower shop with a crowbar. She's trying to steal and destroy evidence to avoid paying the $70,000 debt." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "Impossible. You're slandering her." "Slandering? Do you want to see it? I'll send you the video of her forcing the safe right now. Do you think if I call the police right now, they won't catch her red-handed with the evidence and the burglary tools?" I didn't wait for his reply and sent him the live video feed. "Ethan, I gave your family a chance to resolve this amicably, but you and your sister chose to commit a crime. I'm giving you 10 minutes to tell her to get out of there immediately. If not, I'm calling the police." I hung up and turned off the monitor. I had the ultimate proof, Tiffany's attempted burglary. This proof would not only help me recover my money, but would also allow me to completely sever any bond and moral responsibility with the Miller family. 10 minutes passed. I decided not to call the police immediately. I wanted to file the report the next morning with the video, messages, and statements so the case would be formally registered, leaving no room for late-night pleas. I wanted the Miller family themselves to bring Tiffany to the police station. That would be much more humiliating for them. The next morning, I gathered all the evidence: the video of Tiffany's break-in, the warning message I sent to Ethan, the statements of the large expenses with Tiffany's signature, and my police report. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into the local police station and filed a complaint against Tiffany for attempted burglary. Shortly after, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Chloe, what have you done? You dared to report Tiffany? My mother is very ill. You were her daughter-in-law. How can you be so cruel?" "Me, cruel, Ethan? Who was the cruel one who used my money to support his mistress? Who was the cruel one who used my wedding gift money to buy her daughter a condo? I'm cruel for protecting my assets. Ethan, I gave your family a chance, but Tiffany chose to commit a crime. Now I'm just following the law." I gave him the address of the police station where I had filed the report. An hour later, Ethan, Barbara, and Tiffany appeared at the station, their faces pale. Seeing me, Barbara tried to lunge at me to insult me, but Ethan stopped her. "Chloe, you're shameless. Do you want to put my daughter in jail?" Barbara screamed. A police officer approached sternly. "Please, ma'am, maintain your composure. This is a police station, not a place to settle personal disputes. Miss Chloe and the family of Miss Tiffany, please come to the office." In the office, I presented all the evidence: the report, the video clearly showing Tiffany forcing the lock and the safe, and proof that her motive was to destroy evidence of the $70,000 debt. Tiffany, faced with irrefutable proof, broke down. She didn't dare look at me. "I just wanted to get my papers back," she mumbled. The officer said coldly, "These assets are in Miss Chloe's name. You have no right to enter without permission and take them. Your action constitutes attempted burglary." Fortunately, nothing was stolen, but the act is clear. Barbara and Ethan tried to defend her. "Officer, my daughter was just impulsive. She didn't know what she was doing. Please, forgive her this one time," Barbara whined. "Officer, Miss Chloe is trying to harm my family. She's claiming an uncleared debt from us," Ethan tried to divert attention. I presented the detailed statements and the debt claim. "Officer, I am only reclaiming my money. This sum of $70,000 is backed by invoices and documents. Miss Tiffany's break-in was to destroy the evidence of her debt and evade her civil liability." Finally, after reviewing all the evidence, the police concluded that Tiffany's action was a crime. However, since it was a first offense and no material damage was caused, she would be sanctioned with a very high administrative fine for attempted burglary and disturbing the peace. Tiffany had to accept the sanction and publicly commit not to reoffend. Barbara and Ethan had to pay the fine immediately. Leaving the police station, Barbara and Ethan looked at me with deep hatred. "Chloe, remember this. I will never forgive you," Barbara said through clenched teeth. I looked her straight in the eye. "Mrs. Miller, I don't need your forgiveness. I just need you to return my $70,000. If you don't, I will sue you. Tiffany's fine is just a small lesson. I knew I had won a major battle in this war. I had used the law to punish their greed and recklessness. They had been sanctioned by the police, their honor was in tatters, and the $70,000 debt still hung over their heads. The deadline to pay the debt had expired, and of course, the Miller family hadn't paid a cent. I knew perfectly well they didn't have the ability to raise that sum so quickly, but what I needed was their refusal to initiate the next phase of my plan. I filed the lawsuit in civil court. At the same time, I began to execute my final blow, a fatal strike to Ethan's honor. Ashley, his mistress, had received over $10,000 in expensive gifts from him, all paid for with my money. She had helped destroy my family, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I did some research and found David, Ashley's husband. He was a young businessman with a family and a stable career. Ashley had been cheating on her husband with Ethan. I arranged a meeting with David in a discreet coffee shop. I brought proof not only of the infidelity but also of Ethan's expenses on Ashley. "Hello, David. I'm Chloe, Ethan Miller's ex-wife. I didn't come to cause trouble, but to tell you the truth about your wife, Ashley." David was a calm man, but his eyes showed caution. "I don't know what you're talking about. My wife and Mr. Miller are just business partners." I slid a small folder across the table to him. It contained photos of Ethan and Ashley in private places, affectionate messages between them, and most importantly, the statements of my card's expenses. "David, look at it. Your wife and my ex-husband aren't partners. They're lovers. My ex-husband spent over $15,000 on gifts, rent, and supporting your wife over the last 6 months. All that money is the fruit of my labor. I've divorced Ethan, but I can't let your wife Ashley benefit from the destruction of my family." David glanced through the photos and invoices. His face turned red with anger. He stared at the invoice for the diamond ring Ethan had bought for Ashley. "It's true, $15,000. She dared to cheat on me." I nodded. "David, I have no reason to lie. The proof is clear. I'm not showing you this to provoke you, but because I want justice. Ashley has taken advantage of my husband's stupidity and my money. She has to pay for her actions." David stood up, clenching his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. He said nothing, but I knew his anger had reached its limit. "Thank you, Chloe. I know what I have to do now." That same afternoon, David acted. He didn't go looking for Ashley. He went straight to the Miller family's neighborhood. Accompanied by a few friends, he stood in front of their house and publicly unmasked Ethan. "Ethan Miller, get out here. You dare to mess with my wife and cheat on me? You used your ex-wife's money to support my wife? Come out and face me." David's shouts attracted the entire neighborhood. Ethan, who was at home, came out terrified. "David, what are you doing? Why are you here making a scene?" Ethan trembled. David threw a stack of photos and invoices in his face. "A scene? You're the one who destroyed my family. You're a despicable man. You're not just a cheater. You use your ex-wife's money to support your mistress. You're a parasite." The whole neighborhood was in shock. The Miller family's honor was trampled without mercy. Barbara and Tiffany came out, trying to pull Ethan inside, but David wouldn't back down. My revenge had reached its peak. Not only had I sued them for the debt and reported them to the police, but now Ethan was being publicly humiliated by his mistress's husband. The Miller family was plunged into chaos and shame. As Ethan and his family tried to calm David down, a taxi screeched to a halt in front of the house. Ashley, the beautiful mistress, got out. She no longer had the seductive look from the photos. Her face was filled with panic and anger. Seeing David, her husband, and Ethan scuffling, she realized the situation had spiraled out of control. She walked over and, without a word to David, confronted Ethan directly. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing? Why haven't you fixed this? You promised you would divorce Chloe and marry me. And now what? You've let my husband find out, and I've lost all my honor." Ashley didn't defend Ethan. She demanded compensation from him. "Ethan, I've been by your side, your shadow, for 6 months. Now everything has fallen apart. You have to compensate me for my lost youth and honor. I need $30,000. Ethan, Barbara, David, and all the neighbors were stunned. Ethan stared at her with his mouth agape, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Ashley, what are you saying? $30,000? Where am I supposed to get that much money?" "I've already spent over $15,000 on you," Ethan yelled. $15,000 was just for trivial gifts. Do you think my honor is worth a few trinkets? If you don't give me the $30,000, I'll sue you for taking advantage of me and tell everyone you're a coward who lives off his ex-wife's money," Ashley threatened. David, hearing his wife demand compensation from Ethan, was completely disappointed. He realized the greedy and shameless nature of Ashley. "Ashley, and you dare to ask for money? You're a cheater. You've deceived me. And now you have the nerve to come here and demand money from the man who destroyed someone else's family? Don't you dare set foot in my house again," David roared. He turned to Ethan with a look full of contempt. "Ethan, I won't ask for the money you spent on my wife, but I warn you, if you ever go near her again, I won't let you off the hook. You and your family are already paying the price for this infidelity." David left, leaving Ashley and the Miller family in the midst of the chaos. Ashley, seeing David leave, clung to Ethan's arm. "Ethan, now what? My husband is going to divorce me. What am I going to do? You have to pay me." Ethan completely broke down. He had lost his mistress, had no money, and was saddled with a huge debt to both his ex-wife and his mistress. $30,000? You're crazy. I don't have it," Ethan screamed. Barbara looked at Ashley with hatred. "Get out of here, you tramp. You've destroyed my family. You have no right to ask my son for money." The scene of Ethan, harassed by his mistress, insulted by his mother, and humiliated in front of his neighbors, became a pathetic farce. The Miller family was in absolute chaos. I, Chloe, had witnessed everything from a distance, without needing to intervene, a witness to this act of poetic justice. I knew that nothing could save the Miller family's honor and lives now. After the public humiliation by David and Ashley's demand, the Miller family was shattered and isolated. The neighbors looked at them with contempt. Faced with the $70,000 debt and my lawsuit, Ethan and Barbara attempted one last dirty trick. One morning, I received a letter from Ethan's lawyer. Attached was a handwritten IOU stating that I, Chloe, owed Ethan and Barbara $14,000 with a forged signature of mine. They had faked this IOU in the hope of deducting that amount from the total debt they had to pay me. I let out a dry laugh when I saw the fake IOU. They still thought I was so easy to fool. I immediately took the document to a forensics lab to request a handwriting analysis. I knew perfectly well that my signature was not easy to forge and that this act would be another fatal blow to them. A week later, I received the expert's report. The result was clear. The signature on the IOU was a forgery. It did not match that of Miss Chloe. I immediately sent the report to Ethan's lawyer with a message. Ethan and his mother have added the crime of document forgery for financial gain to their list. I will add this evidence to the lawsuit file. Ethan and Barbara panicked when they learned I had requested an analysis. They knew they had no escape. It was time for my final blow, the isolation of the family clan. The Miller family was a large, traditional family. I had gathered all the evidence: Barbara's gambling, Tiffany's attempted burglary, Ethan's infidelity, and the forged IOU. I drafted an email attaching all the evidence: the video of Tiffany forcing the safe, the expert report on the fake signature, the statements of Barbara's gambling expenses, and the invoices for Ethan's gifts to his mistress. I sent the email to the Miller family's group chat, which included grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and other relatives. The subject of the email was the truth about the greed and lies of Ethan Miller's family and the $70,000 debt that must be settled. The group chat exploded instantly. An avalanche of indignant messages from relatives flooded the group. "Barbara, you dare to forge an IOU and gamble? You've shamed the whole family," wrote an aunt. "Ethan, you're a scumbag. Not only are you a cheater, but you use your ex-wife's money." "I'm cutting all ties with you," said an uncle. "Tiffany, have you no shame? The whole family living off Chloe and now you try to steal?" "We don't accept people like you in this family," commented a cousin. Within hours, I received a message from Ethan. "Chloe, what have you done? You've destroyed my family. Everyone has cut ties with us. You're so cruel." I didn't reply. My objective had been achieved. The Miller family was not only indebted to me and punished by the law, but now they were completely isolated from their last support system, their own family. They had lost all their honor and backing. I had won the war completely. It has been a year since I sent that email unmasking the Miller family. All contact between them and me has completely ceased. The legal process is ongoing, but I know they are completely ruined, trying their best to pay off the debt. My life has changed completely. With my savings and my family's support, I have expanded my business. The Chloe's Blooms flower shop chain has grown from one small shop to 3 successful branches in Chicago. I no longer have to worry about supplementary cards draining my account. Every dollar I earn is the fruit of my labor. But most importantly, I have found peace and true happiness. I have a wonderful relationship with Liam. He's an architect, a mature, attentive man, and most importantly, he loves me for who I am, not for my money or my generosity. He knows the whole story of my former marriage and has always supported me in every decision. "Chloe, this weekend, let's go to the Chicago International Produce Market to see the new flowers. What do you think?" "I heard a beautiful imported hydrangea has arrived," Liam said as he helped me review the accounts. I smiled. "Of course. Having you with me is the best. I need to get a good look at that batch of hydrangeas before taking them to the new shop." On Saturday morning, Liam and I went to the city's largest flower market. The place was bustling with people, the sounds of bargaining, push carts, and the aroma of all kinds of flowers. As I was checking the quality of a batch of greenhouse roses, I saw a familiar figure carrying heavy sacks. I froze. It was Ethan. He no longer had that elegant air, nor was he wearing designer clothes. Now he wore a faded t-shirt and torn jeans, drenched in sweat. He was working as a warehouse laborer, a physical job he had always despised. Liam noticed I had stopped. "Chloe, what's wrong? Is this batch no good?" I shook my head and pointed to Ethan. "Liam, look at that man carrying sacks. It's Ethan, my ex-husband." Liam frowned, looking at Ethan with surprise, but then his expression became serene. Ethan seemed to recognize me too. He dropped the sack and stared at me. In his eyes, there was no longer arrogance or threats, only suffering, exhaustion, and shame. At that moment, I heard a familiar voice hawking, "Fresh vegetables, garden chard, $2 a bunch." I turned. The woman squatting next to a basket of vegetables, her clothes stained with dirt, was Barbara, my ex-mother-in-law, the one who called herself a lady. Now, she was selling vegetables at the market. Her face was weathered, full of wrinkles, with no trace of her former haughtiness, and they weren't alone. At the next stall, helping her mother, was Tiffany, the always impeccable sister-in-law who despised me. Now, with her head bowed, she was helping her mother weigh vegetables. The entire Miller family had to earn a living with manual labor, doing the hardest jobs to survive and pay their debts. Karma had arrived. Barbara recognized me and Liam. She didn't dare look at me directly and turned away. Tiffany lowered her head even more, as if she wished the ground would swallow her whole. I knew I shouldn't make a scene, but there was something I needed to clarify to close all the wounds. I approached their stall. Liam gently took my hand as a sign of support. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Miller." "Ethan," I said in a calm voice. Ethan reluctantly replied, "Chloe." Barbara remained silent, her hands trembling as she wrapped a bunch of vegetables. I continued in a voice loud enough but firm. I didn't come to see you suffer. I came to remind you about the last installment of the debt." Ethan looked up, his gaze filled with worry. "The last payment is $1,700. My lawyer has already informed yours. According to the agreement, you have to pay it all by the end of the month." Ethan sighed, his voice laden with helplessness and regret. "I know. We'll manage. We'll pay it all. I'm sorry, Chloe. I no longer needed that apology. I just needed my money back in full. Once you pay that $1,700, everything between the Miller family and me will be over. I don't want any kind of connection anymore." I looked at Barbara and Tiffany one last time. "Mrs. Miller, Tiffany, money, honor, and happiness are things you create for yourselves. You once had it all, but you lost it to greed." I turned and walked away without looking back. Liam came closer and squeezed my hand. "Chloe, it's all over. You did very well." I smiled, feeling a total peace inside me. I had recovered justice, my assets, and most importantly, I had been reborn from the ashes of my old marriage. I, Chloe, had completely freed myself from the shadow of deception and greed. I was no longer the easily manipulated wife, but a successful, independent, and happy entrepreneur beside the man I loved. My life from now on would only have flowers and sunny days. Seeing Ethan sweating as he carried sacks and Barbara selling vegetables with trembling hands at the market, I understood one thing: limitless greed, no matter how well disguised, always leads to the most humiliating failure. I got my $70,000 back, but the lesson I learned was much more valuable. A woman's worth does not lie in the money she gives, but in her autonomy and firmness to defend herself. The old Chloe was dead. Only a stronger version of me remained, ready to embrace a new happiness.